Today's recipe is a focaccia bread. The difference with today's recipe is that it's going to be a little bit of an art challenge. So we are going to be making the focaccia bread. I'm going to go through how to make that with you. It's quite a straightforward recipe. But then I'm going to show you how to create focaccia art. So if you Google Focaccia Art, or if you put it into Pinterest, you can get lots and lots of ideas of how to create a piece of artwork that is edible using the focaccia bread recipe. So I'm going to show you how to make the bread recipe, leave it to prove, and then I will come back and I'm going to show you how I'm going to do a floral design. Obviously the creation is completely up to you for how you decorate your own bread. Put the oven onto gas mark 7 or 220, so that really high heat for bread baking, and I'm going to make the bread directly onto my work surface. So you can put it into a mixing bowl, but the work surface is going to get dirty anyway because of kneading it. So if you do it into a mixing bowl, you've just got one more thing to wash. So as long as your work surface is clean, this is completely acceptable. Putting the flour into the centre of the table. And I'm going to add in the yeast, which I need the scissors for. So pop the yeast in as well. I've got a pinch of salt to put in, so around there, and then a teaspoon of sugar, so that's going to feed the yeast. So add in the teaspoon, and then just with your fingers, just mix that around, start to combine it. And what we want to do is to make a well in the centre, ready to add in our water. And the water needs to be lukewarm, so a nice warm bath kind of temperature, not too cool that within a couple of minutes it just feels like cold water. It needs to be really warm but not hot. That heat will kill the yeast, whereas the cold water will not wake that yeast up. The fermentation process won't occur because it won't have woken up. It does need the warmth as well as the moisture, as well as the food, and then obviously we need that proving time as well for that fermentation to take place. So I'm just going to get my water and then we'll move on to the next stage. I'll go on to a close-up and show you how I can combine all of this, and we start to knead the dough. So I've got my lukewarm water, you can see there I've got the well in the centre, and I'm going to fill that well, and then from the inside outwards I'm going to start to combine. So you can do this with a fork or a spoon, but again, your hands are amazing tools. This can be really, really easy to do without creating too much mess. So getting a bit of a paste going in the middle there now. So I can add a little bit more water. Remembering, never add all of your water at once. It's very difficult to remove that liquid once you've put it in, whereas it's easy to always add a little bit more. So now I've got dough starting to form in the centre, still got quite a lot of dry mixture on the outside. So trying to combine that in so it's not sticky. Again, make a well in the centre, a bit more water, and bring in more of that flour and start to mix it. Water escaping there, that's fine. And just bring that together to form the dough. So you can see now I've got quite a lot of it as a dough, and then a little bit of the flour still. Now it's good to have a little bit of flour on the work surface for kneading, but we do want to combine most of this. So continue to add in that water. If any of the water runs away, you can just scoop it back in to bring this to that dough that is then nice and loose to start kneading. So tiny bit more water just around the outsides now, and we're nearly there. Once we've got all of this dough together, we still need to be stretching that gluten like we do with any bread dough recipe. We've got the gluten in there that needs to be formed into those elastic bands. So this needs about between 5 and 10 minutes. A focaccia bread's quite a flat bread, hence why we can do the artwork on it. So we can get away with not needing it for as long, but we do want it, as you can see now, it's quite dry and bitty. As I break it, it will just snap. We do want that elasticity. We do want to stretch that gluten so that it really does start to get a much smoother, softer dough that's got more stretch in it to allow that yeast really to breathe that carbon dioxide and start to rise the bread. So now I've got to this stage, heel of my hand. Obviously there's a little bit of the flour on the work surface. If you've not got any flour on the work surface, add a little bit more, or alternatively if it's quite dry, use a little bit of olive oil instead. Palm of your hand or heel of your hand here, pushing down, stretch, fold, stretch and fold. And I'm going to keep doing this now for about 5 or 6 minutes probably. See how I go with that. After 5 or 6 minutes I want to see a much smoother dough that I can then stretch, and then we can leave that to prove. So I'll show you the dough after I've continued to do this for the next 5 to 6 minutes. I've been kneading the focaccia bread dough now for about 6 minutes. So I've got a much smoother dough than I did have. All of the flour has now been incorporated and that gluten's been stretched through kneading. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a little bit of flour into a dish, because I didn't use a bowl, we're using just a casserole dish. Just a bit of flour as a barrier. Again, you can use oil instead. I'm going to pop the bread into here, and I'm going to leave that now to prove for an hour. What I will be doing in the meantime is preparing some vegetables to go on the top. So I've got on here some cherry tomatoes, a pepper, some spring onions, some coriander leaf, and I've got some olives as well. If I come around anything else in the meantime, I'll obviously use that too. But this is going to create a floral scene. So I'll do the preparation, and then what I'll do is once we've left it to prove for an hour, come back, I'll show you how to put it into the shape, and then I will put it onto double speed probably, so that you can see it quickly how I create the image, and then we'll bake it and see what the final outcome is. And then it's up to you to have a challenge, have a go yourselves, and see what you can create with your artistic talents with food. The bread has now been proving for about an hour, so it has gone slightly larger. So all we're going to do now is just knock that back. So we're just going to knead it a couple of times just to soften it, to knock out that air, so that we can then get an even bake. So a little bit of flour on the work surface. I have got flour on my tray, ready to create the base of the focaccia bread, but basically to create our canvas, and then we will create an artistic impression or landscape or whatever you want to do, picture, portrait, whatever you want on top of there. So as I said, I'm going to show you kind of like the views of a field, a country field with some wildflowers is my inspiration. So let's roll this out first of all. So we're trying to get it to an A4 piece of paper type size. So if it's going out of shape, just turn it. Make sure all the time that you are making sure that both sides are being rolled, so it's not sticking to the work surface. And we want to roll it both ways. It will contract, because that's obviously the elasticity in the gluten, pulling it back and contracting it. So you do need to work at this to make sure that you get the size correct, that you think you've got it, and then it will start to contract again. So a little bit of hard work involved, which I'm sure is nothing too much to ask. Once it's got to an approximate shape, it's not going to be a complete rectangle, it will have those rounded edges, but you can just use the rolling pin just to get it as square off as we can without obviously cutting it. We want it to be a natural looking shape. And once we've got it near enough to the size of the baking tray, it can then be popped onto the baking tray that's already been floured to create our canvas. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go on to, you won't hear me talking, I'm going to go on to a faster speed so that I can show you the process of how we can decorate it. Obviously it'll take me a few minutes, but you can watch it and speed it up so it takes a little less time, and then it'll be baked and I'll show you the final product, image, canvas, painting, piece of artwork, whatever you want to call it. I'll show you what it looks like at the end. So now you can see my inspiration is a lovely summer's or spring field, and hopefully you've watched how I've made that. Then you can be as creative as you like, as long as you can use some of the ingredients in your fridge. You can create images. That was just salad ingredients. I did add in some chives out of the garden for the stalks for the olives, and I've also added some rosemary from the garden as well to create that kind of grass across the bottom. As you saw, I brushed with oil first, and then I've placed everything down, and I have just sprinkled it with some mixed herbs at the end. So now it's ready to go into the oven, and it will bake for about 20 to 25 minutes, and then I'll show you the finished product, and hopefully the ingredients will have sunk into the bread a little bit and create a really pretty finish to the focaccia bread. The focaccia is now ready to come out of the oven, so it's been in there just about 20 minutes. And as you can see, it is golden brown, and you can see that the design there has sunk into the bread and become fixed in. It's gone slightly darker, gives a really, really lovely effect. Good time to be creative.